Lights out! Formula One podcast from the No Dunks Inc. Classic Factory. Proudly a part of the Athletic Podcast Network. I'm your host, Trey Kirby. 100% frazzled right now, and I'm joined by our local F1 expert and the biggest B. Arthur fan I know, Graydon Gordian. Graydon, what's up, dude?
Not much, man. I mean, I'm here in beautiful New Jersey, and I was hanging out with my in-laws last night watching Golden Girls, thinking, my God, B. Arthur is pure fire. And she just is killing them out there. These jokes are fantastic. So you're right. I am a huge fan.
B. Arthur, pure fire. You heard it here first. Definitely the first time that's been said in 2022. Is your mean cat named after B. Arthur, or just
the mean cat is named after B. Arthur? No, she is named after B. Arthur. Yes, even the 13 years ago when I got the cat when we lived in Chicago, Illinois, I thought to myself, B. Arthur's great. I'm naming my cat B. Arthur.
So. A longtime B. Arthur fan. We got another longtime B. Arthur fan behind the scenes right now. JD, our team principal, making the magic happen here in the paddock, and he's going to need it for me because, Graydon, like I said, I'm 100% frazzled right now. Dog groomer was taking too long. I hopped on here thinking I was going to get in the stream at the perfect time. Next thing I know, I got to restart my entire computer. I can't see the intros. As far as I know, we got a black background here, but as long as you and I are able to talk about this incredible race, we're going to be doing all right.
I'll tell you one thing. You know who was frazzled? Carlos Sainz. And you know who ended up having a great Sunday? Carlos Sainz. You can always come back. If there's anything that the British Grand Prix tells us, you can always come back from perhaps a rocky start. So
that's exactly right, Graydon. It ain't over till it's over, but we've got some people here who have been with us since the start. So shout out to everybody joining us live in the Slipstream team here on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast later, thank you very much. Drop a comment, leave a thumb on this YouTube stream, send us a 5-star review. Just engage with the No Breaks boys. We got ourselves a classic race to break down, Graydon. Best one of the season so far in my books. But Same. We got to start where we always do with quali on Saturday. A wet one, which always makes for an interesting grid. And oh, baby, was it interesting. Up top on pole for the first time in his career, Carlos Sainz. Like you said, Graydon, he's followed by Max Verstappen in P2, Leclerc in P3, Perez in P4. Kind of our usual top four, if not the usual order. Graydon, what stuck out to you from Saturday?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, Carlos taking pole, was fantastic. The maiden pole of his career, and just a terrific Saturday for him, where oftentimes, let's be real, when it comes down to Saturday and the pressure of qualifying, you tend to see guys like Max and Charles hook it up and perform at their highest level. Both of them made mistakes at key moments. Both of them left time out there on the track. Carlos capitalized on that. That was awesome. The other thing that struck me is that Mercedes brought a lot of upgrades. They brought a front suspension upgrade, a side pod inlet upgrade, floor upgrades, a rear wing upgrade. All of these things were paying dividends in qualifying, in my opinion, and they would on Sunday as well. But I thought they looked quick. I thought they looked impressive. They looked that much closer to being genuine challengers to Red Bull and Ferrari in terms of actually winning Grand Prix. So that it was a great. I mean, let's be real. Wet qualifyings are the best. They shake everything up. It was Bernie Eccleston used to want to have sprinklers and things like that at races to introduce water. And if we're going to do that, it should definitely be on Saturdays, because that's where it is the most fun, for sure.
Well, it definitely made for a mixed up grid. We even saw Nicholas Latifi make it into Q3. You mentioned all of the upgrades that Mercedes had that Hamilton and Russell were able to enjoy. There were upgrades for the Williams team, but only for Alexander Albon. So pretty crazy to see Latifi actually get into Q3 for the first time. I was loving it for him. It was very similar to me to George Russell back when he was at Williams, when it have a lucky wet qualifying and you just feel so good that it doesn't matter, that it doesn't actually count for anything. But very cool to see Latifi have a little bit of success with the old beater car.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention that. You're absolutely right. I mean, Latifi, who's getting so dogged this season, everybody's so down on him, so assured he's out. Making it into Q3 is awesome. But also, Albon's car, to say they brought upgrades is like to put it lightly. The list, I've literally got the list of, I can't even remember this off the top of my head. The list of things that are different about Albon's car are the front wing, the front corner, the side pod inlet, the floor fences, the floor body, the floor edges, the diffuser, the engine cover, and the rear corner. So it's like, I mean, it's basically a new car. It's like Albon, they had totally different cars for all intents and purposes. And in theory, Albon's is the superior one. So, I mean, awesome stuff for Latifi. Super excited for him to get that. They seemed so thrilled in the Williams garage, which was cool.
Yeah, so tons of upgrades for Albon. He also did have a very cute helmet that we were batting around in the group chat with Nora. He had a whole bunch of animals, but I guess that was probably the most successful part of the weekend for Latifi. The other interesting thing I thought that came out of qualifying was with regards to Sainz qualifying number 1. A great tweet was going around from Nate Saunders, who mentioned that Carlos Sainz becomes only the 6th driver in history who has car in his name to finish on pole. I don't know if this is a widely known statistic, Graydon, like if you have to keep track of the car drivers in the sport, but do you know any of the other ones?
I could name 2 of the other ones off the top of my head. Alberto Ascari.
Nice.
Ascari, and then Carlos Reutemann. But I don't know if I don't know if I would have gotten the others. I'll admit that those are the only 2, if I'm being honest. And I'm like, I could have told you that, but I don't think I would have gotten the other ones. The other ones being, wait, hold on. Jose Carlos Pace.
Okay.
Ricardo Patrese, who I do know, and then Giancarlo Fisichella, who I actually if the people in the Slipstream team know Giancarlo, I was like a little bit like, who the heck is that? So I don't, at some point my F1 knowledge has its endpoints. I was like, I don't remember that guy. So but that is I don't know. That's a good stat. We should be tracking. We should be tracking everybody with the word car in their name and how they've done compared to everybody else. So
you would think it would be at least a little bit of an advantage to have car in your name, or maybe a disadvantage, because as people are mentioning here in the Slipstream team, no Daniel Ricciardo on the list. That guy's never had a pole in his life.
No, his name's Ricciardo. He doesn't have the word car in his name.
Oh!
C-I-A-R. He doesn't have it's not spelled car.
That's 100% right, Graydon. I made the same mistake that we've seen on an F1 Kai run every now and then, dropping the I from the late Ricciardo. Of course, I've started doing the dumbest possible thing when I saw this tweet going around was thinking if every F1 driver had car in their name, like Charles LeClerc. That's an easy one.
Carlos is a
Sergio Perez. I love the Alpine team of Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso.
What about, is it Lewis Carlton?
See, this is where I started struggling. Once I got through those 4, I had to start allowing the vans into the paddock as well. Max Van Stappen, Lewis Van Mullen.
Van counts as like an alternate car.
Yeah. Vando Norris, and my favorite, Vans Roll.
Yeah.
Not Lance Stroll, Vans Roll. Anyways, that was qualifying. A wet quali is always fun, and so is firing the pun gun when you least expect. But on to the race. Like we said, the race of the season so far, and I would say probably the last 10 laps of this race were the best driving we've seen so far this season. But we'll take a quick look at the points finishers before we get into breaking everything down. On top in P1 for the first time in his career, Carlos Sainz going from pole to P1 in a roundabout way, I think we have to say. He's followed by Sergio Perez in P2, a crazy drive for him as well. Lewis Hamilton finishes on the podium at his home race in P3. Then we've got Leclerc in P4, followed by Alonso, Norris, Max Verstappen down in P7 after he had a piece of another car stuck underneath his for the entire time. Then we got Mick Schumacher in 8th, his first points of his career. Sebastian Vettel and Kevin Magnussen bringing home the final point there for finishing in 10th place. Graydon, lots to talk about from this race, but what's your big takeaway from the British Grand Prix?
I mean, gosh, one takeaway is hard. That whole top 10 list is full
Crazy,
of
man.
interesting, like weird things to talk about. I think we could talk about every single one of those guys. I mean, so one of my big takeaways is that we talked last episode about how, while highly improbable, it was not implausible for Ferrari to get, and for Charles Leclerc to get back into the championship battle, as long as they capitalized on the instances where Red Bull got unlucky or shot themselves in the foot or something went awry. And the reality is that happened to Red Bull on Sunday, and they fundamentally failed to capitalize. I know they won the race, but they were running 1-2 late. A 1-2 was plausible, or at least 2 podium spots were still very much on the table for them. They failed to make that happen via what, in my opinion, was a strategic miscalculation with failing to pit Charles Leclerc under safety car after Ocon's car stops late in the race. And I think this is just yet another strategic error that puts them even further behind the 8 ball and makes their comeback even more unlikely, which is so disappointing, because I thought, to me, this was so exciting to watch, because I think, as we correctly predicted last week, despite the fact that Red Bull looks in control of the championship, Ferrari and increasingly Mercedes absolutely have the pace to make these races interesting. And the races still are going to be awesome, even if maybe the season-long arc might be increasingly less in doubt. So that, for me, that's my big takeaway, is that Ferrari's indecision and strategic self-defeating nature strike again, which is frustrating. As a Charles Leclerc fan, I'm just sitting there just needing like a stress ball over here to because it's punishing to watch them throw away some of these races like this.
Yeah, the Tifosi were not taking it well on Sunday, despite the fact that their driver won for the first time in his career. As Manuel's saying here in the Slipstream team, Ferrari can still throw away the strategy even with no pressure. They had a 1-2 right there, Graydon. Their argument, which you've heard from Mattia Binotto, was, hey, this is what everybody does. Look at what Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton did in Abu Dhabi last year. We're not pitting from P1, but they gave up track position with Sainz, saying, okay, we're fine to give away P2 if it's going to strengthen his race going forward. I thought it was crazy that they definitely prioritized Sainz ahead of Leclerc, knowing that the championship rests with Leclerc. That does not happen with Red Bull. That does not happen with Mercedes. Even if the number 2 guy is having the better race, they put the championship guy in the front for sure.
I also, it's not just that they were slow to make these decisions, that they weren't prioritizing Leclerc. You get this sense that Leclerc is chasing down Sainz. He's behind him. He's faster than him. And you get this weird sense that they're just now thinking about this for the first time. In real time, they're hashing out whether or not they should let him by and what Carlos needs to do in order for him to not let him by, as opposed to going into the race being like, no, you are equal drivers and you got to fight it out, or Charles is the one that's in the championship and you're not. We're prioritizing him, and that being crystal clear from before the lights go out, right? And that is always the case at Mercedes and Red Bull. They have very clear directives going in. And Ferrari, they seem like it's like, oh, I never even considered what we would do if they happened to be racing each other. This is such a common occurrence that they're so slow to make a decision around, which is shocking. And honestly, if they make a decision more quickly, probably alleviates all their future problems, because if they quickly let Charles pass, and Charles has even more distance between him and Carlos, doing the double stack when the safety car comes is less of a challenge. That's the reason they didn't do it, right? Is they thought, if we do the double stack, Carlos is going to lose his place to Lewis Hamilton. But at the end of the day, you were going to lose places either way if you left Charles out on the hards, Charles ends up not on the podium. So it's clearly a mistake, but it's just these things where it's both the pace of their thinking, the clarity of their thinking. It's not at the level of the other championship contenders, quote unquote, and it's costing them big time. So
yeah,
but
it definitely feels a little bit like I remember my first race, like they're not expecting to be put in a position where they need to make this call, despite the fact that they've been one of the 2 fastest teams for the entirety of this season so far. Whereas with Mercedes and Red Bull, they've been racing for championships the past 8 seasons. They know the moves that they're going to potentially have to make, but it does feel like every time Ferrari is up against the wall with a decision to be made, they just panic a little bit. I saw, or you heard on the broadcast that it was going to be tough for Ferrari to make the call with regards to when the safety car came out and where Leclerc actually was with regards to the pit stop. They would have only had 11 seconds to make the decision, but this seems like a decision that could have been made in 2 seconds and brought him in no problem.
That's people say that they only had 11 seconds. Literally, the moment they have the broadcast on, they have all the data. They have the data, they can see the pace of the other cars. The minute Ocon is starting to slow down and you sniff the possibility that there might be a safety car, a virtual safety car, even if you don't box them yet, you start prepping to box them, right? Like everybody in the garage should start hustling to get both sets of tires ready for the possibility of doing the double stack. It shouldn't even be, nobody should even have to tell you that's what's going on. It's like there's a possible safety car in the next 5 seconds. Let's go right now, right? It should be automatic. It's there. And this is, I understand that's fast thinking. It's a lot of pressure, but you're the pit crew on an F1 team. It's a high pressure sport.
A lot of things happen pretty quickly in F1. Yeah, you got to be on top of things.
Yeah, it's a high pressure sport. This is what you signed up for. It's like, so however, not the only takeaway. Lots of other exciting stuff happened. I mean, first of all, you've got to give a lot of credit to what they've done at Brackley and what the Mercedes team has done, because let's be real, Hamilton looked incredible out there. There were lots of instances where Hamilton looked like was the fastest man on track. And, I don't know, if there hadn't been damage to Max's car, would that have been the case? I don't know, but certainly and similarly, Charles's car had some damage that he was battling through as well, which is actually, I think we're underplaying how impressive it was, how well Charles drove with damage to his front wing the whole time. But Lewis looked incredible. And I think Mercedes at least looks back in terms of their ability to fight even closer and closer and harder for any of these given races, so that's exciting to think that we're back in that kind of 2017, 2018, 2019 era where like legitimately maybe 3+ teams are fighting for the top podium spot each week, which was more characteristic of those years than the last couple. So
we'll definitely get into it a little bit later, but you can tell Mercedes' car was better because there was barely any porpoising talk this weekend, and It didn't seem as violent when you were seeing the onboards with Russell during quali or with Hamilton during the race. Kind of too bad we didn't get to see much of a race from Russell on Sunday, but also I got to say a little bit of a double-edged sword with regards to Mercedes this weekend. This is the race for Lewis Hamilton to win. Like with Verstappen picking up the piece of the AlphaTauri underneath his car, with damage to Leclerc's front wing, with Perez dropping down to 17th earlier in the race when he had nose damage. You saw so many times when Hamilton's having these incredible overtakes, like in front of the crowd. I feel like he was waiting to pass only in front of the crowd so he could get the massive pop every time. And it seemed like he had the better strategy too, pitting for his hard tires way after both Sainz and Leclerc did, thinking we're going to be able to outlast them once we get down to the end of the race. He did have a slow stop later on, but that Ocon safety car ended Hamilton's chance of winning that race. I think if there's no safety car there, he probably catches both Ferraris. I mean, there's no way we're going to know on that one, but he would have a chance.
I don't know if I agree that he catches both, because I think we saw with Leclerc how hard it was to pass if you didn't have meaningfully better pace. Like, I think he would have caught Sainz. I think he would have got past Sainz. But it did look to me like once they were both out there on hards and their hards were both warmed up, Leclerc and Hamilton were doing similar-ish lap times. I think honestly the race was Leclerc's if Ocon doesn't screw it, if doesn't mess it up for him. I mean, unintentionally, it's not Ocon's fault, but you know, if he doesn't get unlucky with that.
But this did to me feel like the race, like the right things happened for Mercedes, for Hamilton to be able to win this race with their car being a little bit better, with, you know, strategy and car problems for both of their rivals ahead of them. Obviously, Hamilton knows the track pretty well. This was the one that he had a shot at winning, and I definitely thought he was going to pull it off. I can tell we're both homers for our guys here because the way I look at it, Leclerc fell off, man. There ain't no way Leclerc was going to be able to hold off Hamilton with laps or with tires that were 10 laps more used. That's when they would have been lighting up for Lewis, but unfortunately, we will never know. We didn't get to see that wicked overtake at the end and a cool battle between Leclerc and Hamilton. But man, when it was Leclerc and Perez and Hamilton, and Leclerc and Perez both go off wide a little bit, Hamilton zooms in on the inside to pull into P2. That was some incredible stuff.
Great move. Yeah. In general, that was that stretch there after the, you know, not the immediate lap after the safety car comes in, because in that we see Lewis and Perez battling, and actually we see Carlos and Charles battling. But once things kind of settle in and Lewis and Perez catch Leclerc, you know, that's the best racing we've seen this season. I think you saw, you know, incredibly gutsy racing, incredibly hard racing, guys fighting back and forth. Charles, in what I thought was probably as good of an evidence. Honestly, there's no better moment in his career so far to me that speaks to the quality of Charles as a driver than literally those couple of laps where he's losing those places. I know the outcome is negative, but he's driving so well and so hard to not just get ripped past by those guys and to fight back, to overtake Lewis Hamilton on the outside, going through Cop's corner, to fight back in place. These are things that are exceptionally hard to do on equal tires or in a better car, much less on much older, slower tires. I mean, so he really left it all out there, not to mention that Lewis and Perez, I think, just absolutely seized the moment. I mean, Perez here, it's incredible. I honestly, I'm not even really sure how he made it all the way back. I mean, he just did it slowly but surely, overtaking cars, chunking his way through, and then having what was a, the safety car probably benefited him more than anybody else. He really was not even close to looking at a podium when that happened. And then, now, found himself in second. So he was the biggest beneficiary of that. But that luck aside, huge credit to Sergio for an incredible race. And, coming back from what was a very unlucky
unlucky. He maybe dropped down to like a P17, something like that. He was pretty low after the first restart, which brings us to another big takeaway from this race. Thank God for the halo system. This was one of the scariest crashes we've seen. Zhou Guanyu, corner one of lap one. Just a lot of congestion at the start of the race. Latifi kind of jets up, and I think it's Russell comes across to cut off Pierre Gasly. They touch a little bit. Russell kind of hits into Zhou, which flips him over, and he just goes scooting upside down for, I don't know. He went quite a distance before finally getting into the gravel. I guess his tire probably struck a little bit of the gravel, which flipped him over the barriers there, kind of stuck in between the barriers. Very scary stuff. The roll bar, or what's it called, Graydon?
The roll hoop.
The roll hoop just broke off. So it was a pretty flat slide. Very scary stuff. A crash is bad when they're replaying it afterwards and you're hearing Brundle say, the only reason we're showing you this is because Zhou walked away. And honestly, incredible that he looked completely unfazed and unscathed after everything that happened. But man, that was a scary one.
Oh my gosh, insane. I mean, definitely, I think shows you how far that they've come in terms of safety in the sport. There definitely are crashes like this where, guys have lost their lives in previous years, where we're seeing guys survive nowadays. And then, and honestly, a lot, a lot of credit. It kind of ruined his race, but you know who deserves a shout out is George Russell for stopping the car and going over to check in on Guanyu Zhou. You know, it looked like he probably could have brought his car back to the pits and changed tires and continue the race. But, you know, he stopped to go make sure the other driver was okay. Kind of ruined his race. It's a little bit unclear what happened there. He claimed that he told the steward or like the people there helping clean it up not to touch it, and they ended up loading it onto the back of a truck, which then he couldn't drive it anymore, right? Because they had already intervened and kind of aided him in the race. It's a shame for George, especially at his home race, but you know, he deserves a special shout out for being. I think it's nice when you see that camaraderie and the fact that the guys really care about each other. And I don't know, it was a moment that I'm glad just feels like it's a touching moment and not a tragic moment, because
Definitely.
in the end, everybody was fine.
Exactly right. I thought that was a nice show of sportsmanship, and unfortunate for Russell that's how his streak this season had to come to an end. With regards to the collision, is it just a matter of a lot of people trying to get the inside line, trying to get the best line through the first corner?
I mean, it seems like, why did these things happen and where do they happen? It's definitely an instance where F1 courses don't have equivalent amounts of safety measures at every point along the course. They actually optimize for moments where crashes are most likely to happen. This was a big criticism earlier this year in Saudi Arabia, where guys kept crashing at that one point and drivers were saying, that this one wall is not properly, supported given the likelihood of a crash here. It should be at a higher safety standard. And that's a space where I guess it is a high safety standard because you're going into a corner off of it. But in general, starts are kind of the thing that throws a wrench in that philosophy, because it is so many cars going so fast. The other example of that is Albon hitting the inside wall at a very fast pace, I think after Vettel touches the back of him. That's just a concrete barrier on the inside in between the main straight and the pits. That's an area where they don't anticipate somebody spinning into it at that speed. So there's a lot of there. It's just a moment where I think that honestly, some of these worst crashes you see in F1 history, they come right at the start of races sometimes, because it's just so many people clustered around and such a domino effect of a small error cascading and rippling outward across the grid. So I don't know if it means that you do anything differently with the cars or change anything. I'm not sure if there's a concrete practical takeaway as much as it's just, but if they do have some recommendations coming from it, I'm kind of all for them, because in general, I feel as if we're never done doing enough to make the sport safe for drivers. It's kind of the way to put it most simply. So
yeah, very scary crash. You don't see the cars flip over as often these days. So anytime that happens, very scary. But I mean, also awesome to see Zhou Guanyu just talking to the stewards, no problem afterwards. Not even a hair on his head messed up. But man, crazy stuff. Also important from this race, we hit on it a little bit earlier, Graydon. First points in Formula One for Mick Schumacher. Had a fun little battle with Max Verstappen there at the end. Scored more points than Kevin Magnussen did. Obviously, first time in his career that he did that. And I think Magnussen even out-qualified him on Saturday. So I was happy to see Mick finally, I don't know, what's Lee always say? Bust his egg? No, that sounds disgusting. Break his duck. Break his duck. I think that's what you say when you go from zero to whatever it is, from zero to not zero. What'd you think of Schumacher getting some points?
Dude, it was awesome. I mean, so happy for him. So glad to kind of get that monkey off his back. Happy to see both the Haas's, I think, perform well after, especially coming out of Montreal, which was a kind of a catastrophe for the team, to come up with no points out of that scenario. But also not just Schumacher get points, but to be like in there and fighting for it. Those last few, so easy at that point late in the race to just settle in, bring the car home and collect your first championship points. But he wanted it, man. He was scrapping with Verstappen right up there in the end, totally unintimidated by the fact that he was going wheel to wheel with the world champion, who, of course, we all know was in a hobbled car. But it doesn't change the fact that for Schumacher, he was unintimidated by the moment, trying to bring it in. I was kind of freaking out on his behalf because I was like, my God, if you mess this up and like crash right now, it's going to be so upsetting, so annoying.
Exactly right. It was like fingers crossed, watching through my hands, like, don't blow it, man. He's had so many races, I feel like, so far this season where he's been running in the points, in the last 10 laps of the race, only to see maybe just a bad decision. The car slows down or he crashes. So to see him going wheel to wheel with Verstappen, I thought that was very cool. You're not going to see those two actually battling for points all that often this season. So to get some experience against one of the better guys on the grid, that was really cool. And like you're saying, thanks to the safety car stopping with like 10 laps left, or going in with 10 laps left, we basically got a mini sprint race, which was really fun to watch. Like we had, I think Alonso was like, yeah, there's some great action up front that I got to watch, which I thought was a pretty funny quote. But at least, it kind of felt like top 8 were battling for positions, all things considered. So it ended up being a really fun race thanks to Ocon's safety car.
Speaking of which, I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of the main folks that, Carlos and Charles, Max and Sergio and the Haas guys, but Alonso coming in 5th, not to be scoffed at. Another weekend where I think the Alpine looks good, looks racy, and probably looks like the best car in the field that's not a Merc, Red Bull, or Ferrari. I mean, that, and Lando has a nice race as well, so I don't want to say that McLaren's totally out of the battle for 4th. Again, Lando puts together a nice weekend, but the Alpine looks good. Alonso looks like he is fully in control of that car, and as long as they just, aren't running into some misfortune or having any engine bugs or whatever, they're putting in really good results out there. So that's a competitive team for sure.
Yeah, right now McLaren has a 6-point lead over Alpine for 4th in the Constructors' Championship. They would have had it. They would be sitting in 4th right now, I suppose, if Ocon didn't have to retire early with, I think they said it was a fuel pump problem, right? Otmar Snaffauer was not happy to see that happen. It's bad when you're pulling over to the side late in the race. But you're right, Alonso had it going. They've been a competitive team all year. They've just had a lot of reliability problems. I feel like, I think with regards to the difference between them and McLaren, Ricciardo, throw the I in there, has been the worst driver of the 4 of them. And it's been mostly reliability issues, I think, that have set Alpine back. Whereas with McLaren, you're getting solid performances from Norris, and you never know what to get from Ricciardo from week in to week out. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Graydon, Carlos Sainz ended up winning this race. This was his first race win of his career, also his first pole position of his career. Can you name the 5 most recent drivers to have won their first race in the same one where they won their first pole? Does that make sense? So like what Sainz did this weekend. Who are the 5 most recent?
5 most recent. My God.
Yeah, 2 of them are currently on the grid.
Okay, one I'm going to say, was Max Verstappen in pole when he won his maiden race, or no?
He's not on the list.
He's not on the list? Okay, because he won I believe his first ever race in F1, but right, he wasn't there. Wow. Who of them? Okay, the answer is it's like, no, I can't, but I'll take a stab at it.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Okay, 5 guesses. Lewis Hamilton.
Yes, Lewis Hamilton, Canada, 2007. He is the 5th most recent, so the longest to go.
Longest
to go. It happened in 2012 to 2 different drivers, and then in 2009 and 2008.
Okay.
And Hamilton's was 07.
Mark Webber?
Mark Webber, that's a good one, from 2009. That happened in Germany.
Okay. Daniel Ricciardo?
No Ricciardo.
Okay. I'll
you got another. This happened in a Red Bull though. And I mean, that's a pretty good hint, I think.
Wait, if it's not, is it Vettel?
Vettel. Yeah. Okay. Sebastian Vettel in 2008 in Italy.
Okay.
The other two are names that we have said on this podcast. One is the driver number that I think I would wear if I were a driver. And the other is probably the most surprising champion of the past 10 years, I would say.
Most surprising champion of the last 10 years. So is it last 10 years? So it's Nico Rosberg is one.
Nico Rosberg, China, 2012.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other would be the number you would wear.
I think,
so 20, so is it 23?
No, I think he's the only number 13 or something like that that's out there. I don't know if that's true. I'm just freestyling off the top of my head.
It's not. My God, I don't know.
Yeah, this would be the hardest one. Pastor Maldonado.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't have gotten that. That's great. I mean, I love that, but I wouldn't have gotten that. You're right.
Yeah,
We did talk about Pastor Maldonado, and you did talk about.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't have gotten there. I wouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah. Prior to Sainz, it was Pastor Maldonado, Nico Rosberg, Mark Webber, Sebastian Vettel, and Lewis Hamilton. Way back, Canada, 2007. So I don't know, Graydon. I think we hit on everything. Sainz winning, the Leclerc shenanigans. Verstappen with a piece of an AlphaTauri underneath his floor for quite some time. I will say, a lot of floor talk this weekend. More floor talk than I can remember. Also, odd to me that there's a piece of wood on the bottom of a Formula One car. What's that all about?
It's about there is an amount of basically to put it simply, like the floor of the car can only like smack the ground so often, and if too much of the wood wears away, literally measure the wear, it means that you've been making too much contact with the floor. I believe is what the point of the wood is.
So the wood is a gauge. That's incredible.
I believe the wood is a gauge. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's. I mean, it's partly as a function, just as a barrier, but I believe it's there. But the real barrier is like the titanium plate.
Yeah,
it's like there's the metal plate that sparks off. But I believe the wood functions as a gauge to know, and you can only lose
so many
slivers? Millimeters or something like that. Something.
Interesting. We got Zhou Guanyu's crash, and we got Mick Schumacher's first points. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing left, Graydon, is to hand out our beans. Who are you giving the full beans driver of the weekend to after the British Grand Prix?
Wow. This is a tough one.
It's a tough one.
I think because I can see an argument for 4 or 5 different people for this week. Sometimes it's obvious. I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna steal your thunder because I suspect this is who you're gonna go, but I'm gonna go with Lewis Hamilton. I think Lewis really drove. I say that because Lewis, for me, drove end to end a brilliant race. Putting it on the podium was really impressive, but also he just is driving hard, driving fast, setting fastest laps, giving it full beans in the spirit of the award from end to end. I will say my runner-up for the award this week was, oddly enough, gonna actually be Leclerc, who, despite the misfortune, I also actually think kind of gave it the full beans, drove really, really hard end to end and drove a very quick, very impressive race with a damaged wing. Those are the 2 guys I was most impressed by, even if actually they ended up a little bit further down the standings than I expected them to with, 15 laps left. So,
yep. I think those are a couple of solid choices. I guess you can throw Verstappen into the mix as well for, fighting through what he and the pit wall couldn't figure out as a problem until after the race, and they got a chance to look at the underside of the car. He was still competitive, even though he knew he had no chance of winning that race. Hamilton, I think, has a solid case. Leclerc has a solid case. But first, I got to ask you about these, Graydon. Still got my kidney beans. The only other beans I could find, though, black-eyed peas. Is a black-eyed pea a bean?
I think of it as kind of a pea.
You would think, but they put it in a Bush's container, and, they're famous for their beans. On the back, they've got a recipe for chicken and beans. So these peas are beans, and I'm giving these full peas to Carlos Sainz.
Oh, you're such a sap. I'm
being a bit of a softie here, but I feel like we're kind of looking past Carlos Sainz, I feel like this is going to be the least remembered first pole and first win ever. Like, nobody even cares that Carlos Sainz won because Leclerc and Verstappen lost. So they're just like, whatever, Carlos Sainz. But this is a major accomplishment for him to actually pull this off. I don't necessarily think he was the best driver, but things worked out the best for him. And he seemed to at least have the best strategy in his own head. Because when Ferrari gave him like soft team orders, I would say is maybe the best way to put it, when they were going for the restart after the Ocon safety car, and they're like, back up the pack. And he's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Then they're just going to pass me a lot easier. He knew that he had the better tires than Leclerc. He knew that he was the one who actually had a chance of winning the race, and he took it upon himself to win the race. So you're getting my black-eyed peas, Carlos Sainz.
I love that. It was somebody, I'm trying to find it. Oh, it was Noli who was pointing out in the slipstream that every time Carlos Sainz like basically disobeys Ferrari's strategy, it pays huge dividends. He did the same thing in Monaco. They wanted him to pit, and he was like, no, we should stay out and just pit once straight to slicks, paid dividends. Ignoring their recommendations here, paid dividends. In general, I think the big takeaway is whatever the pit wall tells you to do, if you're a Ferrari driver, it's like, do the opposite.
Oh, yeah. Ferrari is their Costanza right now. Whatever you think is the right move, the other thing is the right move. So they got to get on their Jerry at least. I don't know if they're going to have the Kramer luck going forward, but fun race, fun to talk about with you, Graydon. We're going to take a very short break, and when we get back, we got some news.
If you're anything like me, you might need a little nudge to buy some new clothes, freshen up the wardrobe. I know I want that new look. I know it, but I just never find that motivation to do it. And once it happens, I feel good. And that's where Stitch Fix has you covered. Take a quick, easy quiz, set up your profile, and let Stitch Fix's experts go to work for you. Quiz is simple, and boom, you get 5 pieces to try on at home. I liked 3, and I sent 2 back that didn't work. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are free, easy, and not depressing like malls. I've been to a couple malls the last few weeks. Oh, it's like they're giant Blockbuster video stores.
Oh, wow.
They're just going out of biz at some point.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Don't walk in there. It's just, they're not what they used to be. Just go to Stitch Fix's website. Get it done. Stitch Fix is far less time consuming, way more to the point. Every piece is handpicked for you and is unique to your size, style, and in your budget, making it the best way to discover clothes that make you look and feel your best. Sign up today at stitchfix.com/nodunks to get $20 off your first purchase. That's stitchfix.com/nodunks to get $20 off your first purchase. This is a limited time offer. You've got to purchase within 2 days of sign up.
Back with no breaks. Mentioned it earlier, Graydon. Maybe because Mercedes sent a whole bunch of upgrades to their car. We didn't have quite as much porpoising talk over the weekend, but we did get a little bit of news on the oscillation front, Graydon. New metric just dropped.
Ooh.
Oh, this is big time. We have been waiting for this, Graydon. The FIA put out a crazy equation here. I don't really know how to explain this, Graydon, but I've always wanted to know.
This is a nice metric.
What's your favorite variable?
Which variable? It's really hard to choose.
Any of your variables. They're so good, huh?
And as a function, yeah, so math. I mean, I have no idea. I honestly don't know what any of this means.
Yeah, same. It's all math to me. I was happy, I took an AP math class my senior year of high school so that I wouldn't have to deal with math anymore after that, and it worked out perfectly up until now, Graydon. I mean, I can handle 3-point percentages. How many threes did you make versus attempts? But once you start throwing sigmas and deltas in there, I'm a little bit lost.
There's way too many parts of the Greek alphabet in this. There's also not 1 but 2 loops. They loop the loop. Do you see that at the end there? There's like a rect loop and then parentheses end loop. It's a double loop on this.
Yeah, there's a lot of rect in here.
Yeah, which I gotta think is there's 2 rects. It's double rect. It's double loops. I gotta think that this is one of the best metrics we've ever seen for that reason alone.
I hope they add it to the broadcast. Like, we'll see the intervals from the leader or from how far you are from the car ahead of you. And also, I would love to know your oscillations and how many joules per 100 meters you're getting. But
yeah.
All I can take from this, Graydon, is seeing an equation this long means we are not at the end of porpoising here. And we're going to have some regulations further on down the line, probably for next season.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, obviously to the people who are to be more serious or remote, for the technical directors and the people who are actually good at math, unlike myself, I think they're going to be able to use this to effectively calculate the amount of kind of vertical movement that the cars can have, and that'll hopefully, be a clear directive for them going forward in the hopes of making the racing safer for the drivers. So I think it's good. It's nice they did it. Visually, it's insane, and I have no idea what they mean. But it's a nice, humbling moment just to remember how much intellectual energy goes into this sport, and how, like, as much at a high level we talk about strategy or tactics or drivers do. It's like there is a lot of things that are just, if for me, are totally unintelligible about the reality of like building and racing these cars. That I just like, this is a highly technical sport in a way. And this is like these little glances into it that I love. I kind of love that. Like, they're very humbling. So,
yeah, to me, I've always thought of Formula One as watching spaceships drive around. Like that's the closest comparison to me. And then when you see an equation like this, you're like, oh, that's the kind of math you got to know to put somebody on the moon or to make a car go 220 miles per hour and actually still stay drivable. So keep your oscillations low, people. 2 millimeters. That's the sweet spot as far as I'm concerned.
That's the best.
One other little piece of news with regards to this racing weekend at the British Grand Prix, 6 protesters were charged after trying to invade the track during the opening lap. Now, obviously, the opening lap was shortened after Zhou Guanyu's crash early on, so nothing came of this. But what was going on the broadcast here, Graydon?
I guess my understanding is that they were climate protesters, which I think there's a lot of validity in expressing concerns about the climate and perhaps F1's role in it. No two ways about it. However, I would discourage all of you fans out there from running onto the track during a live race. It feels like a way you might hurt yourself. But one funny thing that I wanted to point out, people running onto the track during a race, not very funny. Climate change, not very funny. Kind of funny. At least 5 recent instances. This is from Engine Mode 11, who's like an ex-F1 systems engineer on Twitter. At least 5 recent instances: the 2000 German Grand Prix, the 2003 British Grand Prix, the 2004 Spanish Grand Prix, the 2015 Singapore Grand Prix, and this year's Grand Prix. 5 races, all with protesters that have run onto the track, all won by Ferrari. Ferrari cleans up when people are out there trying to make a statement. So in that sense, maybe I should be encouraging, as a Ferrari fan, I should be encouraging you guys to rush the track. It seems to be the secret sauce that the prancing horses need. So
what's the motto that we're seeing quite a bit now? Carbon neutral by 2030, I think, is the F1 marketing slogan. That's a start. But man, there's a lot of way to go with regards to climate change in Formula One. And a part of that, which we've talked about in the past, is maybe going to more of like a modular schedule where they're not having to crisscross the globe quite a bit, because I think that's a huge part of the carbon emission problems, right? Is the travel and the freight in between locations.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as if the race days are exactly, I don't know, they're not the most eco-friendly event imaginable, but I actually do think that's right. It's the distance, the long haul, the shipping, the plane travel, these things required. I mean, these things are definitely, I think, the source of the climate issues that F1 is facing, and is going to, have to continue to make strides around, whether that's, seeing increasingly electric components. They've already moved to the hybrid engines, right? Which they've already done, but will we see continued development there? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but it's certainly something they'll need to take seriously. And I appreciate the protesters bringing those issues to the forefront. I just want them to do it in a safe manner. That's all it is.
I did like seeing Hamilton and Sainz. I don't know if Vettel said anything. It wouldn't surprise me. Them basically saying like, yeah, they should protest, but then kind of having to walk it back when Formula One's like, yes, but maybe we don't want it to happen on the track. But Lewis Hamilton tends to take the right side on these things. So that was encouraging to see at the very least. Got a little bit of news in the AlphaTauri world. Graydon, we've been sort of tracking Pierre Gasly, seeing what if he might look to move teams, if he could find a different seat, but nope. The Frenchman is going to be driving for AlphaTauri for the 2023 season, though. No news beyond that. You surprised at all, Graydon, that Gasly's back with AlphaTauri officially?
I guess at the end of the day, I'm not that surprised. Helmut Marko and some other folks from inside the broader Red Bull organization had made some comments about his prospects beyond the team, suggesting he didn't have other options out there. Who knows if that was true or not, or whether that was just PR maneuvering. But at the end of the day, I think he's raced well there. He looks, he's looked good. When the car's been up to snuff, he's been able to make the most of those opportunities. And the truth was, there was no seat for him at the top team, right? I mean, Perez is locked in. Obviously, Max isn't going anywhere for quite a long time. There was nowhere for him to move up within that organization. So just to hold serve, stay in the series for another year, it's a good outcome. At the end of the day, I mean, there's only 20 F1 seats. If you're a driver and you're keeping a seat, like you've got to be happy with that as an outcome, I think. So
yeah, and it almost feels like to me that Gasly has to wait for a retirement to really move into a premier seat at this point. Like, Lewis Hamilton's going to retire eventually. Fernando Alonso will retire eventually. I think going to Aston Martin would be a step back, but Vettel's going to retire eventually. The grid will shake out differently pretty soon here. We're going to get mixed up in not too many seasons. Gasly is still young enough right now. Personally, I would love to see him at McLaren. Like, I would love to see Lando and Gasly driving alongside each other. Who's the real number one there? He would be an improvement to me over Ricciardo, but maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's waiting to try and get that number 2 seat back at Red Bull. Like, Perez is there for a little bit now, but I have to imagine that Gasly wants to be back there. Or do you think he would prefer changing teams?
I don't know what he prefers. I will say that one interesting thing about Gasly's contract, at least his old contract, and so I'm making an assumption that this applies to his new contract, but it applies to his current one, is that he actually technically is employed by Red Bull and can be assigned to either team. So if for some reason Red Bull did make a mid-season move, let's say an injury put somebody on the Red Bull team out of commission, or as we've seen in the past, they decided to fire someone mid-season. Maybe Perez is underperforming and they decide they've got to make a change. Gasly can be moved in without any contractual or employment complexity. It's literally like he just walks across the paddock and hops in a different car, and he can keep going and everything stays the same. So that is probably for him a carrot that wants to keep him involved, as he's that much closer to a top team, as opposed to hopping over to somebody who's just another midfield team where he's now got to perform in the hopes of angling into a true top team. It's like, it's a messier, less clear path to a seat that's actually competing week in, week out for race wins than his path right now, which is to stay the course with Red Bull. So I think that's probably, if I had to speculate, that's the thinking. So.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's almost more like he needs somebody to beat Verstappen and Red Bull, and it needs to be because Perez isn't holding up his end as the number 2, and they're like, oh, well, great, we've got another elite driver here ready to go. Also in the AlphaTauri world, according to Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko, the team has hired a sports psychologist for Yuki Tsunoda, basically to keep him calm on the team radio. Quote Marko, "We've organized the kind of psychologist to work with him because he continued to rant in the corners, so that inhibits performance. We should keep our emotions in check. Thank God Max Verstappen is calm. Our problem child in this respect, not only in this respect, is Tsunoda. He explodes on the radio. You wouldn't believe it." I would believe it.
First of all, I would believe
it.
We all would believe it, yeah.
But man, these are some pretty harsh words, honestly, from Helmut Marko. A very blunt guy. No doubt.
Helmut Marko is like,
thoughts on this?
Helmut Marko is like one of F1's #1 haters. I just feel like out there absolutely like crapping on everybody all the time. So who's like anybody whose last name is not Verstappen, it's like he's more than ready to like say something crappy about. So I think that so in that sense, it's no surprise. It just shocked me a little bit because from the fan standpoint, it felt like things were going a lot better with Yuki. It felt like he was calmer, felt like he was driving better. It felt like he was more in control. I know this past weekend, he made an error and that, caused an incident, and he was upset. In the wake of that, they put it on the broadcast, showed him, kind of cursing over the air, but he'd also just hit somebody. It's kind of no surprise in that moment, your emotions would run high. But I don't know. It just surprised me a little bit when I saw that they perceive him to be a continued problem. And it made me a little worried about Yuki's tenure in the league, because part of me feels like he's driving well, he's driving better, but is he driving well enough that they'll keep him if somebody as powerful in the org as Helmut Marko perceives him as a problem child? To me, it feels like there are so many talented drivers in the Red Bull stable outside of Formula One that, I don't know, it made me anxious for his long-term prospects in Formula One, seeing that. That's definitely the biggest red flag that went up for me. So.
Yeah, I think definitely that's a solid read on this, kind of putting Yuki on notice. Like, Helmut Marko saying, take a look at Max. He freaks out on the radio, but he's able to keep driving through it. And his emotions, despite the fact that he can be a little bit of a temper boy, he's able to use those to drive his car better, where Yuki maybe he just goes off the deep end a little. But certainly they're watching him. I think probably he scored points in his first race, right? After that, hasn't been very smooth sailing for Yuki there at AlphaTauri, but we shall see. Staying in the Red Bull world, we got a tweet from Joe Pompliano. Red Bull is building its first ever road car, and it'll be designed by F1 engineer Adrian Newey. The RB17 will have more horsepower than the new Mercedes AMG 1. Of course it will. It only weighs about half as much, but the catch, Graydon, Red Bull is only building 50 of these cars, and they cost $6 million. Let's say you got $6 million to throw away. Would you drive a Red Bull road car?
If I have if I have a $6 million car budget, is this my car? Or is it more like I've got $6 million and it doesn't matter what I do with it? Money is of no issue.
Yeah, for you, $6 million is like $60. You're just going to go pick up a new plaything. Is it going to be a Red Bull car? The first Red Bull car?
I mean, Adrian Newey, the guy who designed it, is a true car design legend. I mean, one of the legends of the field. So in that sense, it is very cool. But a Red Bull car, it still is like six. I mean, I don't want to be too much of a hater here, but like it is $6 million for like an energy drink branded car.
Yes,
which is
precisely
like
right.
Which is a lot of money for, lest we forget, an energy drink branded car.
An energy drink branded Honda, right? Like it's a Honda. All things considered.
It's a Honda.
I guess it'll last a long time.
It's a Honda branded with there's like a bunch of 21-year-olds at a club right now in Berlin, just like slamming Red Bulls and vodkas, being like, if only I could buy that car. I mean, that's who you're like guys. So it's so maybe not when we think of it like that. Makes it
but
less
I don't
appealing.
know, man. You drove an Alfa Romeo for a little bit of time. What did you feel cool like driving a car that was on the F1 grid that wasn't a Mercedes? Like a Mercedes, a luxury car, no doubt about it, but you see a Mercedes every time you drive on the road.
Sure,
maybe it's an Atlas, maybe it's an S-Class, who knows? But you don't see an Alfa Romeo. You don't see a Renault on the road here.
No, you don't see Renaults here. You see a lot of Renaults. Yeah. I mean, driving my Alpha was fun to drive. It was exactly what I thought it would be. It was very sporty and had great handling and was incredibly finicky and I had to take it into the shop all the time, like any good Italian vehicle. So it delivered on all of its promises. But now I own a very sensible dad car though. As a father, I had to trade it in for dad life. Wait, I have to talk real fast. Noli Oli is claiming. This is your second shout out of this episode from me, that this RB17 will get you, will get you access to the F1 simulator in Milton Keynes. I will just say that as a guy who I once drove kind of like a lowbrow F1 simulator one time, like a pretty sophisticated high power one, and it was impossible. Like I put this car into the wall at Silverstone like 17 times in one lap. I found it impossible to handle the vehicle. I feel like I actually think that sounds cool, but in actuality, we would all sit in that simulator and be incapable of even handling the fake digital version of an F1 car, much less a real one.
Oh, 100%. There's no way I would drive the Red Bull Formula One car like a regular car, because I would guarantee wreck it. I'm like you. I played like F1 2019, the demo on PlayStation, and I was Valtteri Bottas driving into the back of everybody starting in front of me at the first corner of every turn. Like I could not get past the first turn. I was smashing into everyone. I was like, well, I guess I'll just stick to Toyotas and Volkswagens. So you got to throw in the simulator as well, because guaranteed wrecks if I'm the one behind the wheel. Our last little bit of news here, Graydon, not really news, but Tom Cruise was at the race on Sunday.
Saw that.
We've seen him a few times. He was there celebrating his 60th birthday by watching Lewis Hamilton at Hamilton's home race there. I asked this question on Twitter. Who wins a Formula One race, Graydon? Tom Cruise, Keanu Reeves, who was also in attendance this weekend, or Vin Diesel, who we've seen around the Hamilton paddock quite a few times in the past? First of all, who do you think wins? Second of all, who do you think won the poll?
Okay. I think who wins is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is the guy who strikes me as having is like the guy who actually seems like he's the most skilled at a wide variety of like high speed things. Like, doesn't he actually pilot helicopters? And he has like MotoGP caliber motorcycles. And I do feel like he's the guy who actually would be the closest to potentially piloting an F1 car effectively and with any amount of speed. I gotta think it's that. However, if this was your poll coming from Trey Kirby, I think the people probably said Vin Diesel. I mean, that's probably what I feel like your fans would have said.
Well, thank you for thinking that, Graydon, but unfortunately, the internet agrees with you. Tom Cruise, 49% of the vote, 33% for Keanu Reeves, probably just because he's the coolest of the three, and only 18.8% for Vin Diesel. Wow. Have we ever even seen Keanu Reeves drive a car in a movie? Come on.
Vin Diesel, I mean, this guy, look at all these documentaries he's been in about street racing, Fast and Furious, and all these, and we've so much evidence of his ability to handle a car.
Yeah, come on.
And to think that he couldn't even, that he would be bested by Keanu Reeves, who is the fastest thing he's ever piloted is a bus in LA, so.
Oh, that's a great point. A bus in LA, and JD says he does drive a car in John Wick. So a nice car as sure well. He could handle the RB17. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Tom Cruise would win. The guy does like all of his own stunts for all these Mission Impossible stuff, right? Like he's hoping that if he hangs around the paddock long enough, somebody's like, Tom, Russell can't race right now. Hop in the seat. And he would fit. It would be no problem. That would be another problem for Vin Diesel, stuffing himself into an F1 car.
Tom Cruise, I will say this first of all, Tom Cruise is the person of those three who's most likely to have already driven an F1 car in his life. Like, true. I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Cruise was like, I'm going to train for a really long time and then spend however many, like even if it costs me $1 million, I don't care. I'm going to drive an F1 car once. We would do that, which I kind of respect about him because he has mostly used his immense fame and wealth to say, I'm going to do really extreme things that aren't accessible to the average person, which is a more interesting thing to do with immense wealth than a lot of immensely wealthy people.
True.
So I'll give him that.
I think let them race. If you are a Formula One sicko and you're showing up to the races, we should have some sort of, less high speed celebrity race out there. I saw like they were pulling out all these old vintage cars after Silverstone. You saw
Nigel Mansell's car.
Was
out
Nigel
there.
Mansell's car, that kind of stuff. Maybe give them some slower cars and let's see them duke it out there on the track. That'd be great.
I do think the one thing I always return to before we move on is like the Top Gear guys, the British ones. There's a couple of versions of Top Gear now, but the old ones who used to do it before the show kind of blew up. There's one of the dude. I don't remember all the Top Gear guys' names off the top of my head, but they went out and raced Formula Series cars once, and the guy was and the guy who is the most talented driver of the three of them. He raced a Formula 3 car. He could handle it. A Formula 2 car. He thought it was pretty difficult, and then his Formula 1 car. He spun out numerous times, barely made it around the track one time without spinning. This is a guy whose literally whole life is like car driving and his whole world is automobiles, and he could barely handle these vehicles. So I do think sometimes I don't remember. Even Clarkson, Hammond, and May, as Greg is pointing out, I don't remember which one it was. I could probably look it up, but that episode shocked me because I was like, oh, wow, I could never do this. This guy who drives all day can't even do this.
All right. New rule. You have to be able to explain the oscillation formula to be able to get behind the wheel of a Formula One car. Then it's fine. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, throw another shrimp on the barbie, mate. We're going to Austria.
Yeah, well, summertime calories come and summertime calories go. Ones that come, a little bit harder to get rid of, though, aren't they? So JD, if you don't mind, after the show, I'm going to jump on your old Peloton here and try to get back some of the LBs I've added over the last, 5 or 6 days, Yeah,
man, have at it.
Thank you. Because the thing about Peloton, I love the variety, They have live and on-demand classes from cycling and strength training to yoga and running. They haven't added a fishing one, have they? You haven't seen that, JD?
I haven't seen that yet, but it's we should pitch that.
I think there's something there. I mean, you look like you're having a great time. You're up, you're standing, you're active. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there's something that can
fishing, the most active sport.
Well, JD was saying he was throwing it out there and
fought a shark or something.
Yeah. So there you go. There's some ideas for you, Peloton, moving forward. But whatever your workout mood is, this is the best part. Peloton has a musical selection for your genre. You can rock if you like, maybe some pop music if that's more your thing, maybe even some Brit indie rock. Maybe, who knows, whatever you're into there. Or you could even do a yoga workout with soul music. I think that's very, very important there, So you don't have to always have a high intensity one. You can just have more a calming one. Good thing about Peloton as well, you don't need to dedicate an hour or so for a good workout. You can do a 5-minute job. And that can be enough just to get the heart rate up, get the blood flowing, you get a good sweat up. I mean, in Atlanta, you just have to walk outside and you get a sweat up. But on Peloton, get active, get on the bike and get going. And right now is the perfect time to get in on Peloton. The Peloton
Get
Bike,
at it, Lee.
The Peloton Bike Plus is now $500 less. Its best price yet, including free delivery and free setup. That's very important because, like the IKEA furniture. You're halfway through. You're like out of the little man there with the and it's like that's not that easy.
Little stupid Swedish man mocking me.
Yeah. And there are more game-changing prices available on the original Peloton bike and Peloton tread. Visit onepeloton.com to learn more.
Back with no breaks. We got a back-to-back Jacks kind of schedule coming up. Graydon raced this past weekend. It was a banger, and we're back next weekend in Austria. But before we talk about the Austrian Grand Prix, let's take a quick look at the standings. Nothing has changed up top in the driver standings. We got Max Verstappen with a 34-point lead over his teammate Sergio Perez, a smaller lead, but still a lead nonetheless. Perez is followed by Leclerc in P3 with a smaller lead now over Carlos Sainz in P4. Sainz is followed by Russell, Hamilton, Norris, Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon, and Fernando Alonso in 10th place. In the team standings, Red Bull is still up top with a commanding lead over Ferrari in P2. Ferrari followed by Mercedes, McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, Haas, Aston Martin, and Williams, rounding out the 10 teams on the grid. So we got Austria on the schedule for this weekend. Practice on Friday, quali on Saturday, racing on Sunday. The last time out, podium went Verstappen, Valtteri Bottas there with Mercedes last season, and Lando Norris. Graydon, the track is called the Red Bull Ring. Red Bull won last year. Should we be expecting anything different, or is this a Red Bull track through and through?
Well, it probably is a track that favors Red Bull. It's not just that Red Bull won last year, but in the long and storied history of this track, or this kind of race, which goes all the way back to 1970, Max Verstappen has the most wins here, which is 4. So it might be the only track where he has the most wins. I'm not 100% positive, but there aren't a ton. It's not like Lewis or Michael Schumacher or something like that, right? Where there's just tons and tons of tracks where he's the guy with the most wins at them. So clearly he's very comfortable here. Clearly he knows how to get it done here. It is a track that is, I would say, is like a fairly balanced track in the sense that it's about average fuel consumption, about average, in terms of top speed, about average in terms of time full throttle is deployed. It feels to me like it's like a very balanced, even track, which I think for me will show, will show the true cars themselves rather than like a very extreme, wide open or very slow track where maybe it might wildly favor one of the setups. This is just like, and for me, it always makes for great races. Like I love it. We've seen some great action here. We've actually seen some incredible action between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen here in the past, where they've battled very, very closely. Very dramatic ending to this race in 2019 between the two of them, where they made contact. So it would be exciting to get something similar again this year.
Yeah, no doubt. I think they raced back-to-back weeks last year, or at least back-to-back races at the Red Bull Ring during the 2021 season, if I'm not mistaken.
They did the Styrian Grand Prix
that's right.
Well, just to make up for like lost races elsewhere here, right? So that was it's a Red Bull track, no doubt about it. Like you're saying, Ferrari and Leclerc and Verstappen have had some nice dust ups in the past. Is there anybody else you could see pulling an upset? Like, does anybody have the right car for it? Should we expect more from Mercedes once again? I'll be interested. I think the Mercedes car does probably look, while it looks good and it looks like they're making big improvements, it seems like we saw in some previous instances earlier this year, Mercedes looked its best in tracks that were really wide open, where they could run really low downforce packages, because that was what was best for their porpoising issues. Now, have they solved those in other ways? I don't know. The car has gone through so much evolution that it's almost hard to say, but this would probably be less of a good track than Silverstone for Mercedes. It's probably less ideal for them. But in general, I think, it's something where setup here is important. You see its elevation is very high up in the mountains, and that actually is a huge factor for F1 cars, the density of the air and things like that, right? And so I think there's like a lot of things here where setup will just be really key, and it's not so much about, it's overwhelmingly going to advantage this team, as much as there's still a lot of work to be done between now and Saturday to see who wins. It is a weekend where it is going to be a sprint race, I believe, right? So that's, so that throws another sort of curveball in there in terms of how the grid's going to shake out come Sunday morning. So
looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking with you about it, but we're going to have to figure out when to recap everything, because I'm taking some time off next week. So we'll figure all that out. And in the meantime, follow Graydon on Twitter at Mr. Gordian. That's MR Gordian. NBA season's over, man. You gonna be watching Summer League? Are you that much of a sicko?
I mean, I'll tune a little bit. Yeah. Why not? You know, I got my boys in San Antonio got a lot of fresh faces out there.
Yeah.
So, so I want to see how some of these kids can do.
I do like that the rookie Sohan was his name, right? I like that they gave him Dennis Rodman's number. Dennis Rodman's number 10, considering he's a hair dye guy as well. That was pretty cool.
I like that.
So we'll see how that goes. Make sure you follow No Dunks on social media at No Dunks INC, anywhere and everywhere on the internet: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever. Send us, me and Graydon, some F1 emails at nodunks@theathletic.com. You can subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com/nodunks. Speaking of No Dunks, we will be back this weekend to recap some Las Vegas shenanigans. And if you happen to be in Las Vegas this weekend, we got a big get together at the Starboard Tack at 7 p.m. local time on Saturday. I don't know if that's where the Formula One track is going to be going, but I'm going to try and figure out where on the strip that thing's going, so that maybe me and you, Graydon, next year, we're not talking Summer League. We're talking straight up F1 races.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Wild times, but we'll talk about it in the future. For now, Clipper Bros.
You heard it here first. Have a great time. Turn up. Love you guys. Awesome.
Stay speedy, people. Vroom, vroom.